Well, CV axles, upper ball joints, lower ball joints, knuckles, hub assemblies, all of this because the driver's side outboard CV axle boot was torn and flinging grease all over the place. And one thing kept leading to another. And in today's video, I finished up the passenger side by installing a new hub assembly, as well as the upper and lower ball joints. And something else I'm gonna touch on at the end of this video is the price difference with these parts between dealership and aftermarket. So stay tuned for that. Today I'm working on the passenger side of this 2005 Toyota 4Runner. I recently replaced a bunch of stuff over on the driver's side, and so to make it even and because it just makes sense, I need to replace some of the same components here on the passenger side, namely the upper ball joint, the lower ball joint, and the hub. Now to get to the hub, I have to remove a few things here. I need to remove this brake caliper and then the rotor. But before I can remove the brake caliper, I need to use it so I can remove the CV axle nut. I'll show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to take this screwdriver and slide it down one of these slots of the rotor, which is then going to wedge itself against this brake caliper. And the reason why I need to do that is because when I go to remove this CV axle nut, it's going to be so tight and it's going to want to spin all of this, and without the tire on the ground, it's going to spin. That is, unless we have a way for it to not spin. And this is how. I'm going to remove this cotter pin by using a pair of needle nose pliers and straightening out the end of it here. And there we go. Now, having just gone through this entire process and more on the driver's side, there are a few tips that I learned that I can now share with you. And one of those tips is using a jack stand to support the socket here. This way, when I'm bouncing with all of my weight on the end of this 1/2-inch breaker bar, this socket isn't going to want to just fall off of the nut. That was certainly one problem that I was having on the driver's side. Until I learned this, I don't think I would have gotten it off. Now quickly, the other thing that would probably work a lot easier than all of this is having a proper impact wrench, which of course means you need a properly sized air compressor as well, neither of which do I have at the moment. This is my only impact wrench, and it's just not strong enough to get this thing off. So in my case, I'm gonna be using my body weight, and I gotta tell you, last time this didn't go too well. Let's see here. Oh, yes. One thing I can tell right away is that this CV axle on this side seems to be a lot newer than the CV axle was on the driver's side. The whole reason why I replaced that driver's side CV axle, it looked horrible and the outboard boot was cracked, flinging grease all over the inside of the tire. This CV axle looks to be really, really recent. It looks really good. And so therefore, when I took that dust cap off of here, I also noticed that the nut here for the CV axle also looked really good, recent, new. And so that's not a surprise to me that this wasn't overly tight. That means that whoever installed the CV axle didn't over torque this nut, and I'm very thankful for that. These are the days that we hope for when we work on our vehicles. And now I can remove my screwdriver. There's really no room in here, but there we go. I did finally get that caliper up and out of the way, and now I'm going to remove the rotor. Oh, interesting. It is somewhat seized. I did spray some WD-40 earlier. Do that again. There we go. Just like that, rotor's off. Now we have access to the hub, and behind this hub you can see these 4 bolts. There's 1 on each corner, 2 down below, of course. And we need to remove those. The only thing is, unlike the hubs on my GM vehicles that have holes, access ports to be able to get to those bolts, we don't have that here. So how do you do it? How do you loosen these up without having an access port through the front of the hub here? Well, of course, we can simply use this standard wrench. So I think that this mallet and this wrench should be enough to remove this. Yep. All right. Yes. Right on. That's it. We have our dust shield, which I cannot forget to reinstall. It's something I did last time. There's actually some markings on this one this time, whereas the other one didn't have any. And I can see it says precision laser etched right there. Feels good. I can definitely keep this as a backup. The threads aren't rolled over, although they do not have any form of thread locker on them. Now with that hub removed, I want to look inside of here and see what I need to clean, if anything. And I can see that right there, where that ABS sensor goes, right in there, it looks like there's a big glob of grease. So I'm gonna clean all of this out. And as far as I can tell, there's nothing really wrong with this hub except for one thing. And that is that it doesn't match the driver's side. On the driver's side, I installed the same Moog hub assembly with a part number of 515201. Now, being that this 4Runner is new to me and has 236,000 miles, I don't necessarily know the history of everything on this vehicle. Now, replacing a hub assembly on one side is fine, but for me, I like to know my vehicles through and through. I like to know the parts, not only which parts they are, but that they match on both sides and when they've been installed. Now, breaking open the box for this Moog assembly, we can see they include a seal, but just like on the driver's side, I'm not exactly sure what part number this seal is or what it goes to. It definitely doesn't fit the hub side of the CV axle, so I don't know what this goes to. And here is the hub assembly itself. And taking it out of the plastic, this thing looks really good. This is a very nice looking hub assembly. There's the Moog name right there on the face of the hub. And with these Moog hubs, they do pre-install the red thread locker on the bolts. Okay, to install this hub, the one thing we have to remember is to include the dust shield. The dust shield is something I totally forgot on the driver's side and had to take the hub back off, reinstall the dust shield, and then reinstall the hub. That was not fun, but we learned from our mistakes. And so this time, that is not gonna happen. If you did get to see the video on the driver's side, my intention was to save the current installed hub and replace these later on down the road. Because I was replacing the knuckle, I had to take the hub off. And what I learned in that process is that whoever installed that hub tightened the bolts way too tight and actually rolled over a few of the threads on the very end. And with those threads rolled over, it wouldn't thread back into that new knuckle. So I love when these bolts thread in by hand easily. See, the trick is not letting the extension here come into contact with the hub, because the hub will just stop it and make you unsuspectingly reach torque when you really didn't. There we go. Dust shield's on, new hub's on. Well, actually, plans have changed a little bit. I was going to split the upper ball joint, lower ball joint, and hub into 3 different videos, but I kind of just decided I'm going to put it all into one video. So because of that, I'm not going to be installing the brake caliper, and I'm not going to be putting on the CV axle nut, because I need to get this lower ball joint replaced, and I'm hoping I can get that done with this hub still installed. I would hate to have to take this thing back off. So just behind this dust shield, we have this steering tie rod, and it connects to the knuckle right here. I'm going to go ahead and detach this. Well, first things first, we have to get this cotter pin out of here. Do that by simply bending the legs of it. You can take a pair of needle nose or clippers and just grab this thing, try to pull it out, just like that. Now I'll just use my impact to get the nut off. I now have this puller set up. I'm going to tighten it down and hopefully just strike it with a hammer a few times, and this thing should come free. Well, there it went. Well, here at the bottom of the knuckle, we have this bracket which actually bolts to the lower ball joint and connects it all together to the knuckle. There is 2 bolts here that I'm going to have to remove, and in order to remove these 2 bolts, I can't have the knuckle move. And so therefore, I've temporarily reattached this tie rod end, and that'll hold this whole knuckle in one spot as I turn my ratchet. Not sure if this has ever been removed before. There we go. We're turning. Good. The only thing I hope here is that this bolt isn't stripped out. Let's see what this bolt looks like. Sweet. Everything looks good. Okay. Well, here's the other one. We're turning. There we go. I think we're good. I think we're good. Well, this bottom bracket is now free from the knuckle. And this right here is our lower ball joint. You can see right here we have a C-clip that goes all the way around to this side. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. There we go. And you do have to be careful because that is spring loaded and that just flew at like 100 miles an hour. And this is another one of those jobs that probably would have been easier had I left this attached to the bottom of the knuckle. And there we have it. With just a few taps, this thing breaks itself free. And we are simply left with this ball joint and the lower control arm. I do have to remove this grease boot here, which means I have to remove the clamp holding it on. If you just pull down on it, you can unwind it, and that's what it looks like when it's removed. There's our grease boot, and there's that ball joint. Not too bad, actually. I want to give you an idea of what I have going on here. You can see I've removed the CV axle from the hub, and that was so that I didn't hyperextend or overextend the boots any. I have it tied up to the upper control arm up here. I also have this tie rod end tied up and out of the way because that was getting in the way. And with all that removed, this knuckle is completely free. Looking at the back of the knuckle here, you can see this seal is totally corroded. So I'm actually glad I did this because I do have a seal and I can replace that now. But back to the task at hand, I'm gonna try to press this ball joint out of here. I did go to my local parts store and rent 2 different kits. The one kit that actually has that puller, that press, and then the other kit which has just a lot more cups in it. So of course you do have to go through the various cups and find the right situation to fit your needs. But I think I found something where I'm not gonna have to actually cut the stud off on the ball joint. So I'm gonna put some pressure on here. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't look like this thing is budging at all. It looks like I'm gonna have to use some heat. Okay, we already have some pressure on there. Let's see what happens here. Okay, I've come to the conclusion that I think I need to cut this off after all. I was trying not to. I thought I had the right setup here with these cups and everything, and I thought I did. I mean, everything seemed fine, but I just want to make sure this isn't a variable here. You can see the cardboard in the plastic bag. I've covered up the hub and the bearing situation, so, you know, just a bunch of little tiny metal particles don't fly around everywhere and get in places I don't want them to be. I did have to cut this off on the driver's side. I was just trying to, you know, not have to do that, but here we go. We cut it off. And if you look up closely to this bag, you can see the static has attracted a lot of those metal particles that are flying around. That's the stuff that I don't want to be getting into anything here with the brand new hub, which is also why I'm wearing a mask, eye protection, ear protection, gloves, of course. You always want to protect yourself when you're dealing with stuff like this. Well, I don't know if cutting that stud off is what did it here. Maybe that thing was hanging up in there somehow because I just put a little pressure on this and it popped through. Wasn't even expecting that, of course, and so therefore I wasn't filming it. But let's see if we can film the rest of the way. Oh yeah. There we go. It's coming out. Woo-hoo-hoo! All right, looking inside, we can see the same thing as the driver's side. We just had a little bit of rust that basically welded that ball joint in there. So I'm gonna clean some of this out. For the new ball joints, I went with Moog, just like on the driver's side. Part of this whole process on the front end of this 4Runner is really just to make sure that everything is good to go. Everything matches, there are no issues, no problems with previous installers or previous parts. We have found a few issues that we've corrected. Now, one of the big things for me is to make sure that all the parts are new, that I know the parts, that they're installed correctly, that they match, and all that stuff. This is the same part number, of course, K500417, and it is made in the USA. This ball joint does slide in from the bottom. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Doesn't feel like it's getting hung up on anything. We're just about there. Yeah, we're there. All All right, looking up from the bottom at the ball joint we just pressed in, we can see that it is completely seated. The hoop there that the ball joint is pressed into does have a little bit of rust there, so you can kind of see the difference between the actual ball joint and the hoop of the control arm. And here's what it looks like up on top here. We just have to get that C-clip in there. There we go. Just to make sure that thing is seated properly. Just go ahead and move it a little bit, and that is seated in its groove. Well, I just popped that seal out of the back of the knuckle there, and I just wanted to show you. Looking real close here, you can see just how chewed up all of the rubber is on this. And this is the new seal I'm putting in. Part number 710573, and this is what that rubber is supposed to look like. And before I go installing this new seal, I'm gonna clean the surface. And this seal will simply press in to place. The main thing I'm going to do is use a block of wood taking a close look at the seal, it is pressed in evenly, even on this side. I have this lower ball joint bracket on, and I'm going to go ahead and torque this down. Cotter pin is installed. Well, as you just saw, even though I had a little bit of experience with this driver's side just a few weeks ago, the passenger side was still a bit difficult, though that experience did help tremendously. I was able to pull from that experience to get this passenger side done a little quicker and a little more efficiently. And I was able, thankfully, to keep the factory Toyota knuckle on that passenger side. Something I wasn't able to do here on the driver's side because someone had stripped out the two bottom bolt holes that attach that lower ball joint bracket. Look, I could have kept that passenger side the way it was. I wasn't experiencing anything out of the ordinary that caused me to want to replace those parts. So then why did I do it? Well, it all comes down to knowing this vehicle through and through. With over 236,000 miles on the clock, this thing has had some repairs. I don't know who's done those repairs with what parts and how long ago. And with stuff like this, I like to replace them in pairs. That way I know that both sides have these same parts installed by me, the same person, at the same time. It just helps me sleep better at night, knowing the history of these parts. And by doing things like that, this preventative maintenance, you do come across issues that you wouldn't have otherwise found. Like on this driver's side, how I had a hardware store bolt that was bolted up into the bottom of that knuckle holding on the lower ball joint. And as it turns out, that hardware store bolt was totally stripped out. Both the bolt and that hole completely stripped out, which is why I ultimately changed that knuckle. As a matter of fact, all of the work on this driver's side was fully documented, and I will link those videos down below. All in all, I think this 4Runner is coming along quite nicely. Still a lot of work to do, but I don't think that'll ever end. Now, after all this work, I've noticed my steering wheel is off to the left a little bit, so I'll be getting an alignment this week. That way I can drive straight, and then hopefully on to more fun stuff. Like, for example, this hood I need to fix, and I'm thinking about vinyl wrapping it. What do you guys think? I'm also thinking about maybe doing an exhaust upgrade. You know what? I want to know what you think. Why don't you comment down below and let me know what you would like to see done on this 2005 4Runner. Now, last but certainly not least, let's talk about the prices. So in the previous few videos, of course, working on this driver's side, a lot of comments were telling me, why did you pick this brand? Why did you pick that brand? You should have stuck with Toyota parts. How could you? Stuff like that. And while I agree, I am an OEM guy all the way, when you hear the price difference between the Toyota parts from the dealer and the parts that I bought, which are good name brand parts, aftermarket, you're gonna be shocked, I think. And that's all gonna be detailed in the very next video, so stay tuned. But I will tell you this. The price difference on just one side, all the parts on just one side here, the difference in price was over $2,200. And I'll leave you with that. If you like this video, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up. If you've watched this far and you're not a subscriber, please hit that subscribe button. And I am Jimmy for One Road, and I will see you in the next one.